Welcome to Viewpoints. I'm Heather Isbron, and with me today is Thomas MacLellan, Director for Homeland Security and Public Safety for National Governors Association at the Center for Best Practices. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you very much.
Tell me a little bit about what you do.
I oversee the Homeland Security and Public Safety Division at the NGA, and we are the NGA Center for Best Practices, and we are a 501c3 not-for-profit. Our job is to function effectively as a cross between a think tank and a consulting group for governors and their top staff. And in my division, Homeland Security and Public Safety, we have a fairly large portfolio. We do everything from sentencing and corrections to justice information sharing to public safety broadband and cybersecurity. And so in that role, I work with all the governor's Homeland Security advisors, all the governor's criminal justice advisors, the governor's public safety broadband advisors, and through those networks, we help support governors' policy priorities across a range of areas.
Tell me about the policies that you have as priorities, and what does that look like when they get implemented?
That's a great question. Right now, one of the issues that we are working on through my division is cybersecurity. And so we've recently stood up a national, it's a resource center on state cybersecurity issues. And it's chaired by Governor Martin O'Malley from Maryland and Governor Snyder from Michigan. And the objective is to help governors figure out and determine what are the best actions they can take to effectuate, as we describe, as forward-leaning a cybersecurity as possible. Right now, from a cybersecurity standpoint, we've seen a lot of discussion around what the Department of Defense is doing to protect .mil, what DHS is doing to protect the .gov. We've seen the executive order come out from the White House, but there has not been a lot of focus on the state role in cybersecurity. What should a strong cybersecurity posture look like for a state? What's a good framework of actions that states can adopt to support and protect the cyber infrastructure, not just that the state owns, but that's also in a state. So for example, the critical infrastructure and key resources that are housed in a state, 85% really reside in the private sector. And how do governors then work in partnership with the private sector to protect issues and to protect infrastructure that's really in their state? And so through the Resource Center, we are beginning to look at developing a policy framework, for lack of a better term, that governors can turn to effectuate as strong a cybersecurity policy environment as possible.
Yeah, and with all the Secretary's emphasis on private sector collaboration, with resources being so limited across states and jurisdictions altogether, it seems to me that you almost have to work with the private sector. It used to be maybe thought of as optional and people would pay lip service to it, but tell me about the challenges of working with the private sector and really trying to get something done.
Well, I wouldn't see them as challenges, I see them as opportunities. So we've put together, as part of the heart of this Resource Center on Cybersecurity, a National Policy Council on Cybersecurity. And we've put that together. It's a 22-member council. And it will include representatives from Maryland, from Michigan, our chairs. It will include representatives of various Homeland Security folks, adjutant generals. It will also include representatives from the private sector, including folks representing hardware, software, malware protection, so forth, financial, ISPs. And their job is to help us think through what is it that governors can do to help them do their job to effectuate as strong a cybersecurity posture as possible. And at the end of the day, what we want to get out of the Policy Council is advice, is recommendations, is a policy framework that governors can turn to adopt for their own state with respect to cybersecurity.
And so at the end of the day, and when this is achieved, hopefully, are there papers that are written to kind of showcase the thought process so that maybe other states can adopt these types of policies?
So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting together, at a minimum, a governor's guide on cybersecurity, and that will include the policy framework and other resources. We're also looking to stand up a couple subcommittees that will look underneath the council to look at different issues more specifically. For example, the electrical grid, or what is the best way to leverage the panoply of federal resources that are out there. And so, how does a governor and a state interplay with FBI, with DHS? And those may be chapters in the guide, or they may also be standalone. So part of the question that you're asking is around implementation. So not only will we have a governor's guide, we've done them on Homeland Security, we've done them on other issues. We're also going to work as part of our second phase. We're going to identify a core of 10 or so states to actually go out and begin to implement the suggestions that are of the Policy Council. So we'll actually go work with states, work with state teams appointed by governors to help implement the suggestions, again, with the notion of how does the governor best create a policy framework that supports cybersecurity.
And how do you see the local representatives, the local officials contributing to the policy? How would they have a part to play in that?
Typically when we call them policy academies. These are these protracted technical assistance events, if you will, that may last a year. And we ask governors to put together these interdisciplinary teams. So for example, when we will go out to a state on cybersecurity, we'll have the state CIO, we'll have the state Chief Information Security Officer, the CISO. We'll also involve law enforcement, and we'll also involve local governments. And so they get bought into the process. And so it's not a top-down approach. It's very much a collaborative, bottom-up approach that supports the policy priorities of the states, aligned with the best practices that have come out of the recommendations from this Policy Council.
Great. And you mentioned cybersecurity very expansively, which is great. Are there other priorities that you have there currently right now?
Yes. So one of the things that I support in our division is what's called the GSEC, the Governor's Homeland Security Advisors Council. And this is a formal body within NGA comprised of all the governors' duly appointed Homeland Security advisors. And through the GSEC, the Governor's Homeland Security Advisors Council, we've identified a number of other policy priorities, including grant reform. It's much in the news. Budgets are tight. Homeland Security grants have continually been cut, 50%, 50%, 50%. We don't really see it getting any better, but the question is, how is the best way moving forward? How can we restructure the grant? So we are going to be looking at that as a priority issue for the National Governors Association, both the center side as well as the Office of Federal Relations side.
It sounds like you have your work cut out for you.
Yeah, we do. Take for example, fusion centers that states support. The budget cuts are really hurting fusion centers, and they have probably not always done the best job advertising and their successes, but they're critical to states with respect to the Homeland Security apparatus. And so how do they change? How do they continue to sustain in a constrained fiscal environment?
Well, what's the answer?
That's tough. There really is no answer. I mean, it's a good question, but it may involve restructuring. It may become a repurposing of some of the missions. But it's really going to be for the states to decide. One of the things that we try to do at NGA is support governors' policy priorities, but support their work. And so, I like to say we're agnostic as to the approach. And so one state, it may be a particular way, leverage stolen vehicle fine or a fee on a license. In some states, it may be something else. And so, we try to help support whatever the governor decides to do.
Well, we wish you luck. These are all very challenging questions, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Well, thank you, and appreciate the partnership with you.